trying to pin this down in physical terms. You know, it's yet it doesn't mean we shouldn't study it physically. I just noticed that it looks like the trickster is at work often in undermining our very best physical data. We have something good, and then, you know, I'll see, this happens to me all the time. I see, oh, wow, this is a great case, you know, wonderful. And I study it, and then some group comes along and says, oh, it's a big hoax. They faked it. You know, the Billy Myers is a good example. I mean, the trickster was having a field day with us there. And what the trickster does, fundamentally, there's a great book about the trickster by a guy named Lewis Hyde. And the trickster, basically what it does, it's a force, an archetype in nature that shakes up a culture when it gets too complacent. That's what it does. It breaks up the forms. You know, Hermes is the ultimate trickster in the Greek mythology. And if we've gotten too kind of restricted into our sort of physical hubris, you know, and we're sort of so focused on small physical proofs, it's going to shake us up and make us look at things differently. That's now, a trickster is not a person. A trickster is a kind of God force of a sort, or devil force, or whatever, in nature. How do we evaluate UFO or encounter reports when direct physical observations are not available or possible? Now, for me, this is a very important subject, and the next one is really the same, in the same area, and I'll take these together. What is the proper methodology or criteria for examining experiencers' accounts? What constitutes reliability of witnesses in this area? Now, for someone who works primarily with human experiences, this is a huge subject. And it starts out clinically, okay, but that's not enough. Like, clinically, is this person telling the truth? Are they mentally ill? Are they talking about something that really happened to them? Is it a dream? And I do a clinical evaluation of people, and as you know, I'm on record as many, many times saying that by and large experiencers are sound mentally. They've been troubled by what happened to them often, but there's nothing in their personality makeup that a psychiatrist would discover that has anything whatsoever to do with the experiences that they've had, and that's based on a clinical evaluation. But that's not enough. And because you can, I notice when I talk to people and I present this clinical reality, if people aren't ready to go there, they're still not going to believe, or not take it serious. It's not about believing anything, but it's, so I've gotten interested in this notion, and I actually learned this from the Catholic prelate who's been mentioned here a couple times, Father Corrado Balducci, who was, you know, they actually have this in the Vatican. He's a retired Vatican demonologist. That's an actual job description in the Vatican, you know, and you know how seriously they take that kind of thing, you know. And at a conference in 3 years ago in San Marino, he said why the church takes this encounter phenomenon so seriously. He said because there seem to be so many reliable witnesses. And we, he went on to say, know a lot about how to evaluate witnesses because we have to decide what miracles. We're always dealing with miracles. So when you're dealing with miracles, you're dealing with miracles reporters. So they know how. They even use psychologists to examine children who see some, you know, apparitions of the Virgin Mary. But they have very strict criteria for, and a lot of that is intuitive. I asked Rod Skinnendorf yesterday, well, what do you do in native cultures, or your culture, to decide whether somebody's telling you the truth? He said, well, you go by the reputation that person has, whether it fits into what the tribe already knows, and there's some other thing. There's a kind of sacred quality that a truth teller has, that you just know that person's telling the truth. You can be wrong, but there's something that you sense that this is a person who's telling the truth. They're expressing this with that they've been someplace, they've brought something back it's almost like a sacred kind of function. In fact, I often feel that when experiencers who have that sacred truth-telling, reliable witness quality get challenged by, you know, media or insulted or whatever, that this is unethical to do that. It's unethical to challenge us. It's not just a clinical matter of science. It's an unethical act to contradict someone who is bringing some kind of truth from a higher dimension. There's a lot more to be said on that subject. What new discoveries or developments in physics do we need to learn more about? And I certainly I'm not up to date in all of these fields. I don't think any of us are. But these are some of the subjects that are relevant to this. And the physicists that I talk with in the last decade or so, more and more physics is catching up, at least in theory, in its possibilities to explain something that until the last 10, 15 years would be totally outlandish. Sometimes I think that the miracles and the new paradigm and of reality and all of that, it's hard to tell where we just don't know enough. We're not sophisticated enough in terms of physics to know. One kind of miracle and new paradigm of reality gets taken over by a new understanding in physics and technology at some point. That's supposed to be Schrodinger's cat, I think. That's, again, Will Boucher's imagination, which, again, involves the paradox and quantum mechanics of sometimes the cat in the box. You all know about that. Sometimes it's how do you know whether it's dead or alive? It can be both dead and alive at the same time. And, you know. I will mention particularly the notion of non-locality as an area that I think is immediately apparent as important, which has to do with the fact that people can be influenced or something can change. There can be a relationship between people who are, or between people and an object where nothing passes in between. There's simply a linkage in some way. It started out with subatomic particles, but now it seems to apply in the macrocosm as well, that change can occur without there being anything passing in between. In other words, there's a linkage already present. It's related to also to the notion of the quantum hologram. That is that everything is already there. So in a sense, doesn't require energy to pass. That it's simply what connection shows up at any given time depends on the context and the circumstances. The notion of interdimensional travel, for example, Michio Kaku, if any of you have heard him lecture, he's an outstanding, brilliant physicist in New York University, I think he is at now. And he talks about how you don't really have to think in terms of, well, I can't get here because there's billions and billions of miles and all that. He says it could be that these other dimensions are simply present and there can be direct passage from one dimension to another, and that these beings, whatever, may have mastered the way to cross dimensions so they aren't dependent on vehicular travel in the primitive forms that we think about. In that way, objects, people can travel, or beings can travel infinitely faster than the speed of light. The zero-point energy, again, this is the people discovering that there is a huge amount of energy in space that we didn't know about until recently, and that people are working on ways of harnessing that energy. So again, the spaceships might travel by somehow taking advantage of the incredible energy that already is present in what was thought to be, until fairly recent years, dead space. What kind of shifts in our philosophical framework or worldview do we need to make to grasp this phenomenon more fully? I got to keep track of my time here. Okay, we have about another hour, right? Something like that. Okay. I touched upon this, and again, it's a large subject, but I think that at the heart of it is to develop some kind of framework that allows us to live in the paradox of traffic between the unseen world and the material world. In other words, that there can be something that is not of this world, in the material sense, can manifest in the material world. Or it can pass across dimensions and manifest. Or it can be not entirely